Okay, and I'm back with Mathias Eklöf, the founder and CEO of Hype Ventures. Hello, Mathias.
Hey, Sebastian. Hey.
Hype Ventures, it's a Swedish investment company focusing on AI, SaaS automation, deep tech startups, and especially with R&D in emerging markets. It's a long description of the company, but you do a lot of things, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. So I'll take it from here. I have around 10 minutes, and then I'm boarding a plane. And if it looks if like I'm in an airplane hangar, that's more or less what I am. But so time is a bit short, but that's actually a very good thing when it comes to me and presentations. In any case, I'll try to be concise. You can jump in anytime, obviously, or ask something later. Hype Ventures, Swedish investment company. I'm a serial entrepreneur myself, but I turned into an investor. We've done so far 10 investments in Ukraine in the last 12 to 15 months, early stage investments. So that actually makes us one of the most active, believe it or not, early stage investors in Ukraine. There's a few points that I'd like to make during this short time. If you hear something in the background, that's some announcements they're making. So if you want to check our portfolio, by the way, it's hypeventures.io, and these are the companies that we have stakes in. So they are mostly seed, early stage. There are some that have done A and or B rounds. So to the points here. About Ukraine, what makes Ukraine special? So there's obviously a lot of talent, we know that. There's also a relative lack of investment capital. And you can compare this to Sweden, for example. So Sweden has a huge amount of capital for many reasons. And you can argue whether there's a lot of talent or not in Sweden, but even if there's a lot of talent in Sweden, the relative balance is such that Ukraine has a deficit of capital. And if you're an economist, you will recognize this. If you're not, don't become an economist. In any case, when you have a lot of supply of something, as you have in the case of talent with Ukraine, the price might be lower, and in investment terms, that means that the valuations might be lower. So that's like a technical explanation for why Ukraine might be very attractive for investors. There's many other reasons as well, but you do have this lack of capital. And if you kind of take a look at the bigger picture, in the United States, for example, there's a huge amount of capital, and that capital is increasingly going to Europe. They're looking towards Europe, and in Europe, investors are more and more looking at Eastern Europe and maybe particularly Ukraine. And there's already a few examples of American VCs. So a VC is a venture capitalist. So American VCs that already have made deals in Ukraine. And there was a deal announced in December where Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the top VCs in the world, super famous company, they invested in Reface, Ukrainian startup. And we co-invested with Andreessen Horowitz in Allset last year, around a year ago. So there's already some American investors looking at Ukraine, and Ukraine has a good reputation. Ukraine has a good name with American investors. So back to sort of the specifics on Ukraine, there's been an increased volume, both in the number of deals and in the amount of capital in Ukraine in the last few years. And I stole this slide. If you're a startupper, you know that you should steal with pride, I believe. So I stole this with pride from A Ventures, which is a Ukrainian investment boutique. So the deal volume grew in 2020, and in terms of money, it's already passed $500 million, which is actually not bad. That number grew around 5% in 2020. The growth in 2019 was even higher. But 2020 was COVID, so that partly explains it. But in any case, both the number of deals and the amount of money being invested in Ukraine is growing. And there is this thing also that makes Ukraine special in terms of the talent pool, and that's obviously the outsourcing or IT or software development industry, where you have talented, skilled programmers and project managers and so on and so forth, that after having spent a few years working for foreign clients, for example, decide to try their wings and start their own startups. And that's just an amazing thing to have. It's a huge, huge benefit for Ukraine. So the IT industry is kind of showing that it's providing the next generation of entrepreneurs in Ukraine, which is great. I'll say about Sweden and Ukraine, if you would compare the two, that both have relatively small home markets, which means that startups in both countries are looking to international markets at a very early stage, and that's also a good thing. It makes the potential market obviously bigger. Well, I'll say something about how you would invest. Like, if you want to be an investor, what would you do? First of all, it's a full-time job. So it's some people have this idea that you can invest as a hobby. That's very difficult to do. So it's a full-time job, and the question is then, if you want to invest in Ukraine, what are your concerns? Like, what do you need to keep in mind? Doing a time check here. Well, if you invest at an early stage, you invest more in the team than in the technology or in the product. And that's simply because at an early stage, you don't know what's going to work in the marketplace. So you have to be ready to change your product and so on. And that's why it's important to have a team who is flexible and ready to change. And looking at Ukraine, it's a fact that there are not many later stage startups in Ukraine. So Ukraine will have them. There's a few, and there will be more. But at this stage, it's more early stage. And at the early stage, you have to invest more in the team. Now, how do you then assess a team? It's harder to assess a human being than to assess a technology stack or something. And the honest answer is, which VCs might not tell you, but the honest answer is that it's a lot about gut feeling. But then another question comes up. So how do you base your business model as an investor on gut feeling? You can't just walk around waiting for your gut to tell you stuff. So what you do is you go to conferences, you go to events, you network. And I think a very important thing here is to have a sharing mindset. And that's one of the many things I like about Beetroot as well, that there is this kind of sharing aspect to it, kind of social aspect. And as an investor, you have to be ready to provide value to startups. It's not as much, it's not they who should work for you, like you should work for them as an investor. So even if you don't plan to invest, you might help a startup with their presentation or give them some connections or something like that. So even if you think the idea is crap, you might still do something for them. And that brings me back to Ukraine, not the crap part, but the sharing part. So that's what also makes Ukraine very, very special, is this kind of open and sharing mindset that entrepreneurs have between themselves. So they share contacts, they share ideas. And I haven't seen that in the same way in, let's say, Sweden or the US. So I really hope Ukrainian startups can keep that sharing mindset. It's a huge strength. It's not a weakness to share, it's a strength to share. There's this kind of feeling of collective, of doing something together, and there's a hunger within the Ukrainian startup ecosystem. And these things mean that we will definitely continue to invest for years and years and years to come in Ukraine, and I hope that more and more investors will also be attracted to the Ukrainian startup ecosystem. So I'll just say something about COVID. I mean, there's so much said about COVID, so we shouldn't overanalyze it. But definitely, it's increased the importance of tech and remote work and all that stuff. And Ukraine is very well positioned there. So I think I think I'll stop there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm thrilled and tickled to be to have these other speakers to join them in the ranks. Thank you. If there is any question at this stage, I'll be happy to take it. I will need to start moving pretty soon.
How much time do you have, Mathias?
Yeah, I think I might. Let's do a question. I'll start like walking towards the gate. So since the phone would be easier, but since I'm on the laptop, I'm a bit limited. But let's do a question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. I have one here prepared. I'll
stop sharing here.
Yeah, that's okay. Now they'll only see our beautiful faces. How often do you have to convince investors who might have a bad perception of Ukraine, and how do you do that?
I think that was a problem maybe earlier. I think it's changed just in the past, couple of years maybe. There are still questions. People don't know that much about Ukraine, but I wouldn't say like it's a major issue. Like investors have this interesting problem of having too much money that they need to invest, and so they're actually happy to find good startups to invest in.
Really a problem?
I wouldn't say so.
No, that's good. I have more questions in the chat, so if you want to get going, I think I'll let you go.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thanks for the opportunity, and I'm happy to follow up with anybody if anybody wants to know more. Yeah. So Thanks again. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you for coming, Matthias. It was also very interesting for me to hear, and I think it's reassuring that there's a lot of ongoing investments in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna end this presentation, and we'll be back with Dominic Piotet, who's the CEO of Unit City in Kiev, and he'll be telling us a bit about that. It's going to be very interesting. Stay tuned.